Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you want to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 57 of Breaking Step. Motes of lights filled Tibbs' sight, and his heart slowed. No, small lightnings. He blinked to clear them, trying to understand what happened. You are here! The word exploded like thunder within the lightning. The first on his left, the next on his right, and the last above him. I am glad! I didn't think you would few find me. The volume lowered, which eat words until they no longer hurt, but they still had the thunder's strength, and moved around with each one. It was as if a crowd with the same voice hid within the lightning, and a random person spoke each word. Or, Tibbs realized, you're an element. Yes! This time the word boomed too loudly. So loudly, Tibbs was shoved back. He kept blinking, knowing it wouldn't help. These weren't spots looking at the sun and then away caused. They were the element. You're lightning. You're lightning? Of course. You came to me, did you not, child of human? Not, he rubbed his temple. Could he have been an element? Laughter boomed all around him. It has been a time since one came to me unplanned. He remembered Mama's warning, given to him as the sky turned gray and the wind picked up. And they hurried to their shelter. Never stay out in the storm. Seek a low building. Hide under lest it take you away from me. His heart tightened. Why did she leave him? Why did she have to be taken from him so early? He wasn't ready for the world. What other lessons could she have given him? It will pass, the voice said with a gentleness that carried as the word danced around. Nothing lasts. That doesn't help, Tibbs replied bitterly. What do you want? To move, to dance, to flit and be. Tibbs shook his head, took a breath, and ignored he wasn't breathing. There was no air here, only lightning. That sounds like what air does. I thought you were all different. Air is everywhere, and ever changing, ever moving, never fixed. The pause was filled with a crackling Tibbs could imagine was laughter. I am here, and here, and here. I stay, I go. The word jumped around, and Tibbs gave up understanding what he meant. The elements weren't people, so he couldn't expect them to act or think like he did. So, this was an audience. How he'd gotten here, that didn't matter at the moment. The goal of his audience was to get the shadow of the element. It would be within lightning, which was all around him. It is here. The word had such joy in them as they bounced. Tibbs smiled. He looked around, and it didn't help. All he saw were the sparkles of lightning. He reached for some of the darkness that was darkness was the wrong word in his ever lit place, the lesser brightness that followed the flashes. One of them might be the shadow. His hand closed over nothing. Lightning didn't laugh. Tibbs wasn't even sure he watched. There was something of the stretching silence that made him think the element was no longer aware he was there. But that couldn't be right. Tibbs was inside. Lightning had to know about it, since this was him being ignored? That didn't feel right. The element was distracted? What could distract him from what was within him? Lightning chuckled, the sound dancing around and causing bursts of light and following lesser light. Tibbs tried to follow them, but they were too quick. One close, the other far, ahead or back, up or down, left or right. There had to be something, a pattern that would let him work out where the voice would be, where lightning would be. For that, Tibbs needed to get him talking. The only question that came to him was the one he didn't think he had time for. How did I get here? The way all come to me. Up, left, right, up, down, behind. But not exactly. This wasn't a puzzle with only a few set moves. He had all around Tibbs to move in. But I wasn't having strong emotions. I was amused by the guards surrounding me. I was curious how their metal weapons would work while I was suffused. Then I was puzzled by the lightning on my fingers and their light. So much light he couldn't breathe. So much So much the pain only registered as the thought this might he swallowed. There had been too much for him to register the terror he felt. You feel strongly, child of human. I was there, you came here. I was there, and you came. How was he supposed to work out some patterns when the words were never exactly in the same location? Okay, how were you there? There is lightning in the clouds, but it wasn't hitting. It wasn't. It was dancing over my hand. Does metal make lightning? Laughter, sliding around him this time the way he thought he could, though in a way he thought he could follow, only for it to jump when he set his gaze on where he would have been next. This wasn't working. Metal and I have a kinship, the way air and earth dislike each other. Tip stilled himself. He needed a different tactic. That doesn't make sense. Not liking someone isn't the same as having a kinship. Is it not? Metal and I are touched, as air and metal are. Connections at the same are the same in that they are. The flavor of them does not make them false. Trying to understand lightning was more of a distraction from what he needed to do than letting him learn anything. Then that connection lets metal make lightning? Laughter again. Metal cannot make me any more than I make earth, corruption, light. But there is light. Tibs motioned around him. No, there is only me. Tibs sensed, and lightning was right. There was no light essence anywhere here. So how was it so bright? Was that lightning created another kind of light? The way cold came about differently depending on the element? Can something act like an element but not be that element? Everything is. Everything is either of us or from us. We make it, or it echoes from what we make. Tibbs reached for a flash, knowing it was a waste of time, but at a loss for what else to do. The kinship we share makes the rest. Tibbs stopped in the process of reaching for another one. What was he doing? All he do was make himself all he'd do was make himself out of breath with all this moving around. He groaned. He'd done it again. He was treating this place the same as the world he came from, acted like he had a body when all he was essence. You do like remaining locked in the way you think. Lightning mused. You are, then are not, and yet you act as you will always be. He meant all of them. People, Tibbs realized. Tibbs pushed himself away from himself, attentive to any attempt by lightning to move away. He didn't. There is no away, lightning said, the words moving within Tibbs, too fast to get a sense of the accompanying flash, but the further he spread, the more the voice remained within him. He made out nuances. Not every flash was there, then completely gone. Some slid from one location to the other instead. It happened so fast that even when it was within him, all he perceived was the faint trail that the slide left behind. Lightning didn't so much flash and gather more of himself for a word than was elsewhere, as if he caught his breath before each word in place. It only paused for it, then moved again. Could he stop at all? If Tibbs forced him to ponder something, would he stay still long enough for him to make out the shadow? Can you stop moving? Tibbs asked. Can a human stop breathing? Can you stop eating? Can you stop being? For a little while. Well, I don't know about being. I think that happens when we die. So can I. And the words are how long you can stop, isn't it? It is. So this isn't you testing me to be sure I deserve the shadow. This is you being? You deserve what comes by achieving it. We do not test the way the world exists in your mind. We do not seek for you to fail or succeed. We seek for you to understand. Understand you, me, us, you, all. The impression he got from lightning was very much like what had moved over his hand. The impression he got from lightning was very much like what had moved over his hand. Oh, okay. Strands in all direction from a trunk that jumped from place to place. Within that trunk, the intensity varied, causing the impression of shadows among it. Except that one of them moved along a trunk instead of changing intensity. It was carried along as lightning moved. Tibs formed his essence around that region, making himself dense as he moved along with it until it melted within him. His core reserve grew, although he could no longer tell by how much. A new reserve formed between air and purity, crackling with lightning. So that's all there is? Tibbs asked, me understanding what you are so I can get the shadow. Nothing is all there is. Everything is. It all moves, even once it stops. That. What else did he expect? Lightning was an element. He couldn't hope to understand everything about it. I guess that's it then. I can go back. Tibbs staggered, nearly slipped on the wet roof. His legs shook from the need to move, to run. He giggled, lifting his face to the falling rain. There was so much to do. What could he do? What he could do that he could do? Where to start? Here? No. There? No. Of course not. Why bother with standing here or there? He should start both and all the others. No. Oh, he could do so much now, and he would never stop. Do, and do some more. A woman groaned. His gaze flitted about from one thing to the next. A person, a lantern, a sword, something burned, a shield, another person, a shard of glass, shard of pottery. Too much for him to understand what it meant. Not that any of that mattered. He had too much to do. He needed more, and he needed to move and stop. The mental command he gave himself triggered such horror it nearly sent him running. He couldn't stop. To stop was to end. He had to move, always move, and do. How could he be thinking of stopping? Tibbs kept himself in place, focused on the sound of the rain hitting the roof to fight the ever-growing terror. It wasn't the element, and he realized he was suffused with lightning. How? It had been metal before, not important right now, since that was the problem. The solution was simply to let go. He dropped to his knees, panting. He felt like he'd run the city's roof from one end to the other, even if he was still exactly where he'd been struck. The roof was charred around him in a pattern that matched that of lightning, never seeming to shift as water flowed over it. 7 bodies sprawled around him, singed and burned. 3 were dead, their essence gone. The others were hurt, but their essence fully there and not leaking away. Not dying, and no injuries that would cause them to die. But there was something to their essence. Anytime someone's essence was the usual thin sense of them wasn't. Anytime someone's essence wasn't the usual thin sense of them, it indicated they were injured. It broke with the bone, leaked out when the injury bled. Even inside them, poison corrupted it. This was none of those. He'd never encountered this before. He applied purity, only to have it come undone when it touched a changed essence, as if a jagged knife shook quickly, and a thin... Wait, what? Shook quickly, and a thick fabric. Quickly and tore a thin fabric as it touched the teeth, or like dancing lightning within the essence. Tore. Really? Oh no, okay. Tearing. The charred marks spread from where he'd stood to each of the broken items and person. However it had happened, lightning had struck him and spread through the roof and to the people. It had hurt him, caused pain. It could do damage. He looked at one of the body without essence. Lightning could kill. Mama had been right to warn him away from storms. Light flashed, and thunder almost covered the sound of the crashing stone. It came from the side. So it wasn't the brokerage that had been hit. He smoothed the jittering within the 4's essence as best as he could. This was all he could do. Short of waking them, and he wasn't risking that, their sense of duty might be greater than any gratitude they felt, if they even believed Tibs had healed them. He ran, the rain quickly stealing the roof from, I don't need that roof, the roof From his view and his sense, unless he focused there, he sensed the destroyed building, jumped over it, making disc out of rain as stepping stone. Exhaustion caught up with him faster than he expected, for far longer after it should, considering how he'd felt on letting go of lightning. He slipped into an unoccupied room, dried himself, and sat at a desk. He considered suffusing himself with purity, but the act of being still, of not doing much, after the need to move that came with lightning, felt nice. He untied the bag from his belt, surprised at how it still looked and felt mostly empty. The slight bulge could be from it being folded in on itself. He reached in, then deeper, groping around. His shoulder was in the bag's mouth, and still he felt nothing. If not for Archer's warning, he might have put his head in to see where it all was. He didn't have that problem with his hiding place or Jekyll's with his pouch. All they had to do was reach in, and what he wanted was there. Except this time, he'd reached in wanting nothing. He'd expected to feel the coins and papers and pull that out. He envisioned a stack of paper where there had been writing. They were bound by a leather strap. He reached in and his finger touched paper. He unclasped the leather and spread them on the desk. They were fine, although the although the bag, along with his clothing and armor, was singed. The papers were the same size, two of his hands side by side high, and three of them wide. The words were in letters he recognized, but arranged into words that meant nothing to him. 3 lines of them in the center of the paper. The edge of the paper had decorative loops, knots, and flowing lines. At the top, 2 words with the sense of being a name in the way the first letter of each was taller. Karina hadn't been able to explain why the first letter of people's name was written taller. Of one of those, it's just how it's done, she said. There were too many of them for Tibbs's liking. At the bottom of the paper, 4 lines of smaller text, almost too small to make the words out. The page below had the same words in the same place. Even the decoration around the page was the same. The one below was also the same. As far as he could tell, they all were. The 2 and 7 pages in the stack. How and why this had been done baffled him. There was no weave in the paper, although he didn't know if magic would leave something behind to indicate it had been used to make identical copies. What did anyone need with many of the same pages for? He pulled every stack from the bag and lined them on the desk, 2 and 2 of them. Some were less thick, some thicker. The name at the top was the same for each stack, as were the words from the small text at the bottom, and the top 2 lines in the center. The third varied between bundles, but was always the same within it. He had 5 variations of that line, and no idea what that could mean. These weren't contracts. Darren had written one for him and the merchant, as well as the one between Dawn and the corruption sorcerer. Contracts were lines after lines after lines of words explaining every detail until Tibbs had wanted to gouge his eyes out. So what were they? They had been in a safe with coins and metal bars of the same material, all valuable things. So these had to be 2. The only person he had who might know was Archer. But Tibbs didn't trust him to tell him the truth. But did Tibbs trust him to tell him the truth about it? He didn't trust the man at all. He placed one of each variation in the bag, then added the thinnest and thickest one. He figured it would seem odd that there had been one of each exactly. The others he put in his hiding place, starting with the thicker and continuing, figuring he'd put what didn't fit back in the bag. Only they all fit. Stowe had warned him he couldn't hold as much as Jekyll's pouch. Punch. And only smaller things. He added a bar of each of the metal, and they fit too. Maybe he should test just how much it could hold once he was back in Craggle Rock, and after he showed them to Darren. Whatever Archer said, the merchant would tell him the truth. He couldn't even ask how Tib had acquired them. Not that he'd care about them being stolen. Water trailed on the floor of the tavern as Tibs hurried to the stair. Once in the room and the door closed, he dried himself and dropped the bag before the archer. What? The man looked him over. Happened. Tibbs looked at himself. Right, everything was singed. Things didn't go according to plan, but I'm okay. He dropped onto his pallet. I wouldn't do that, he said as Archer grabbed the singed bag. By the bottom, there are a lot of coins in there. He weighed the bag in his hand. How much? Tibbs shrugged. The room you sent me had a safe taller than I am and wider. He emptied it. I emptied it in there. Archer opened it and put his arm in to the elbow and came out with a handful of coins. He dropped them in and with a whistle he dropped it in with a whistle and pulled one of the bars out. How many are these? I didn't count them. What are they? They're a way to carry more coins than the equivalent weight. Than their equivalent weight in them. Did you take some? He asked, glancing at Tibbs as he put the bar back in. The deal was you get the coins and I get to not have to deal with the assassins anymore. It wasn't like Archer would know about the bars he kept. The man nodded and pulled out a stack of paper. Tibbs kept from reacting at the ease he did it with. He couldn't have known they were in there, and it had taken Tibbs work to get one. The surprise on the man's face confirmed that. What are they? Archer's gaze flicked to Tibbs, then back to the stack. Didn't you check them? I don't know those words. The man nodded. They're just accounts for what they've accumulated. Tibbs didn't need the glow to tell him that was a lie. Ledgers didn't look like that. Did you deal with the contracts or just the coins? I burned them. How did you know which ones to burn if you couldn't read them? I burned everything in the safe that were in that room. Archer stared at him. All of them? Is the building even still standing? It's stone, Tibbs replied flatly. And there's a lot of fire essence in the weave protecting it. I don't think it can burn. I just burned what was in the safe. Metal got hot, but nothing outside of them caught fire. He stretched. I'm going to sleep. The sound of coins knocking against each other accompanied his descent into darkness. Did you hear? Sonia asked, placing the bowl of stew and tankard before Tibbs and Archer. Someone tried to rob the brokerage. Tibbs had wanted to leave as soon as he woke, but Archer told him the person with the letter was on their way. So he had to remain. Isn't there always one? Archer replied before digging into his food. But this one nearly got away. They say he made it to the roof before the guards caught up and killed him. Good for them, he said dismissively, and Sonia returned to the bar. Tibbs considered the lightning strike, the burn left behind, and the state of the surviving guards. I guess it makes sense they think I'm dead. Archer looked up from his bowl, but Tibbs didn't elaborate. The archer didn't need to know about his audience. He just hoped the roof wouldn't be visited by someone with lightning as their element and sensed the closeness to the element there. At least it wasn't yet another place like that in Craggle Rock. They're saying that so no one will think they were robbed. They can't have anyone thinking it's possible to steal from them. Tibbs chuckled. I don't think that's why they're saying that. Why? This time the tone said Archer wouldn't take a non-answer. Hopefully he wouldn't work out more than what Tibbs said. I was hit by lightning. You what? He snapped his mouth shut as others glanced in their direction. The guards were still unconscious when I left. Archer leaned in and lowered his voice. How did you survive? Magic. The archer opened his mouth only to close it and look at Tibbs with a lot of respect and a little bit of fear. He stayed quiet as he ate. The letter was placed on a table by a man with a tube slung across his back. Archer handed him a token and he left. The man pushed it to Tibbs, who opened it and couldn't read the words. Is this the only letter like this? He asked. Yes. No light. You don't have another one hidden somewhere that says the same thing in different ways? No, Tibbs, I don't. I said this was it. I'm a man of my word. No light on any of them. He had to be content with that, since he couldn't know if the archer would change his mind one day. He stood. Then we're done. Tibbs, the man called as Tibbs walked away. He looked over his shoulder. Archer hesitated, then shook his head. Tibbs left the tavern and went home. And this concludes chapter 57 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story as well as the other two before it, they are up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of what's Royal Road and support me in the process, that is on my Patreon. We are about 20 chapters ahead there. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the note, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.